You'd probably not be surprised to find that the world's first railway that could be described as a metro was in London. Indeed, the word metro derives from its original name, the Metropolitan Railway, which today is called the Metropolitan Line. To be fair, it was Paris that popularized the term, but they themselves got it from London. Of all of the underground lines, it's probably not the first one that will come to most people's minds, and tourists are unlikely to encounter it much. However, I was keen on checking it out, and it surprised me. Despite being quite old, there's a lot that I found it to have in common with the metro systems that I'm most familiar with, the so-called American Great Society metros in San Francisco, Atlanta, and Washington, D.C. They're all quite suburban, pretty fast, have longer trains, and are also home to great scenery in the extremities. So I was very eager to take the Met Line for a ride. This video doesn't really intend to be a deep dive into the history, mainly because there are people on this platform far more qualified than me to talk about it, who you're probably already familiar with, but it is still important to set some of the context. The line started out running between Paddington and Farringdon in the city, capital C, via Baker Street, Euston, and King's Cross. It expanded all across the city, lowercase c this time, including what we call today the Hammersmith and City Line, but the key route would be the one that ran northwest towards Harrow, Amersham, and eventually places like Aylesbury and Verney Junction, and even a place called Wendover. I don't suppose they play jet lag over there. Today, what we call the Metropolitan Line only runs up to Amersham, plus a few branches along the way, to Chesham, Uxbridge, and Watford, with Chiltern Railways operating the further services. Much of the land near this trunk line went up in value, and as such it was developed into expansive housing estates, collectively known as Metroland. Today you can still see all that, plus some more modern examples of transit-oriented development in clusters around several key stations like Wembley Park and Harrow on the Hill. I'm starting my trip today at Baker Street, the hub of the Metropolitan Line. It has 4 dedicated platforms, with a few services even terminating here. First up, we run in a tunnel non-stop to Finchley Road, while the Jubilee line makes a couple stops in a tunnel of its own at St John's Wood and Swiss Cottage. Since this line is incredibly long and more commuter-oriented, not all services at peak hours make all stops. The terminology that some of my viewers might be used to is local, limited, and express, but here it's all stations, semi-fast, and fast. The semi-fast trains skip Preston Road and Northwick Park, and run to all 4 of the line's branches. The fast trains only run to Chesham and Amersham and skip another 4 stations on the way to Moor Park. What's more, all southbound fast and semi-fast trains in the morning rush hour skip Wembley Park. And of course, in the stretch from Finchley Road to Wembley Park, the Metropolitan Line itself is a faster version of the Jubilee line that makes 5 intermediate stops, such as here at Kilburn. The entire line here is 4-track to allow for the 2 lines to not interfere with each other. Despite only some trains being called fast, the line itself has a considerably high average speed, and indeed top speed. This is Harrow on the Hill. We'll come back here later. A quick look at the interior reveals a key difference between the Met Line's trains and those used on almost every other tube line. Front and back seating is present on one side of the train. This is known as the S8 stock because it has 8 cars compared to the S7 on the District, Circle, and H&C. Can you guess how many cars those trains have? What unites the S stock as well as being fully walked through, which is not the case on deep level tube lines, and probably for good reason. This right here is the curve of tracks that trains currently use to get onto the Watford branch. And that was the North Curve, a rarely used track that could allow services to run from Watford to Rickmansworth, but they don't. The branch up to Chesham is single track after leaving Chalfont and Latimer and takes quite a while to get up to. Quite literally up, The station is about 100 meters above sea level. Until 2010, when the S-Stock arrived, Chesham outside of peak hours was only served by a 4-car shuttle to Chalfont, which meant to go anywhere else you'd have to change there. And here we are, welcome to the very edge of the tube, Chesham, Buckinghamshire. Population 23,000. The train would stick around for another 10 minutes, so I thought I'd go out and quickly explore the town. While it could be described as a commuter town for London, it definitely has charm. It's also worth pointing out that the High Street was pedestrianised in the 90s, which really adds to the character. Over in the distance there's a clock tower, but it would tell me that I have to hurry back to the station because the trains only run every 30 minutes and I have more places to go. Turning back now, I headed towards Moor Park, which is the station where the Watford branch splits off. It's probably the quietest tube station I've ever been to, only really there for a pretty wealthy housing estate. That likely explains the high amount of park and ride. Oh, by the way, don't ask what zones Moor Park is in. Park and ride is common on quite a few Metline stations, which isn't something that you usually see on the tube. While it's nothing compared to the massive garages you see on Great Society metros, it's still notable. Of course, being a very long line, it is going to cater to commuters. I don't intend to be critical, I don't think there's anything wrong with Park and ride, I'm just pointing out that there's a lot of it here. The next place I wanted to check out was Harrow on the Hill, quite a significant station being the last one served by all the branches, and Chiltern trains also stop here, the last stop they make before getting to Marylebone. At street level, it reminded me a lot of the DC metro stations on the Red Line in Maryland, such as Silver Spring and Bethesda. Lots of mid-rises, a pretty nondescript shopping center, and a major bus station just off to the side. Quite a wide range of buses stop here, including a couple on the Superloop network. So that was the Metropolitan Line. It's a line that feels like it could have been built 100 years ago, 50 years ago, or 10 years ago, all at the same time. Lots of new metros in Asia, especially China, India, and South Korea, are being built as faster express versions of already existing lines, or just really fast lines on their own. Which I think is a nice sort of full circle moment in terms of the world's first metro line being very suburban, and now some of the world's newest metro lines also being very suburban. While the first proper deep-level tube didn't come for another 30 years after the Met Line opened, the subsurface network grew quite substantially to give us what we know today as the Circle Line and all the branches of the Metropolitan and District lines, and of course the H&C. Network-wise, those lines feel a lot more like an S-train system that you see in mainland Europe, but they do have quite a tight stop spacing. One fun fact that I love is that in a bit of an homage to their nature as competing companies, today the Metropolitan and District lines do not intersect. And here in this final clip, see how many trains you can spot. I'll catch you later.